Why are we fascinated by the ocean? What could possibly be down there for us? Will we find resources? Knowledge? Or will we find nothing but
Corpse Ocean is a game developed by Kira, who is known for Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion and Lost in Vivo. It was developed in just 10 days for Dread XP's Dredge to the Depths Game Jam, a game jam all about oceanic horror. So why am I going to talk about this game? Because through my many playthroughs, I have noticed that this game has synthesized many sources of inspiration to create a true love letter to oceanic horror. From real-world expeditions to H.P. Lovecraft, we are going to do a true deep dive into an eerie Lovecraftian nightmare. Once we start the game, we get a slideshow of text explaining that on August 9th, 1989, an experimental Navy submarine went missing in the Sargasso Sea, which is right here. And I'll go over the Sargasso Sea more in a bit. It's actually really important. 3 weeks later, it is found, and it is carrying unidentified organic material that must be retrieved. So the game takes place around August 30th, 1989, or more than likely sometime in September, since it probably took a while to get the submarine together. The Sargasso Sea is a region of the Atlantic that has terrified sailors in the past. See, by definition, normally a sea is at least partially bordered by land, or maybe completely enclosed by land, like the Mediterranean Sea is. But that's where the Sargasso Sea differs. The Sargasso Sea is surrounded entirely by oceanic currents, creating what essentially amounts to a really large eye of the storm. As you can imagine, this was really dangerous back in the day when ships mostly used sails. Sailors would travel here, get thrown around by all the currents at the border, and then they would pop out inside of the Sargasso Sea, where it was basically a windless dead zone. And it's a lot harder to navigate that when your ship completely relies on wind. Also notable about the Sargasso Sea is how it got its name. The surface is entirely covered by a species of seaweed called sargassum, and it really clumps together and is all over the place here. Sailors would get scared that sailing through here, they would get tangled up in all the seaweed and be stuck to just starve to death. Now, while that fear is unfounded, the fact that there was no wind in this part of the sea did pose dangers of being stranded. This is a very dangerous situation to be in, because weather may never form in your favor, and you could easily die of hunger or thirst or exposure. As you can imagine, this part of the ocean has inspired many fiction writers, including, notably, William Hope Hodgson. William Hope Hodgson was a weird fiction author from the 19th century, a precursor to Lovecraft, and somebody who Lovecraft actually read and really enjoyed. He's probably best known for his novel The House on the Borderlands, which is kind of a proto-cosmic horror novel. Before he became an author, he was actually a sailor, and he hated it. But the time he spent on the ocean, I think it was around 8 years that he was a sailor, that time added an authenticity to many of his stories that were set on the waves. William Hope Hodgson would write a set of stories that eventually became known as his Sargasso Sea tales, and they were all set on the Sargasso Sea, where in his imagination it was a place full of extreme danger where you could get entangled in the seaweed or maybe encounter sea monsters underneath the waves. In modern times, the Sargasso Sea is protected because it is a region of extreme biodiversity with many fish species native only to this region. So even though the Sargasso Sea is not as mysterious as it was in the past, it seems to still be inspiring horror authors to this day. Now we begin the game proper. You control the submarine from its cockpit. You can move forward and back, turn left or right, and go up and down, naturally. You can also turn your lights on and off, although I have no idea why you'd ever turn them off. Looking at the monitor on your right, you have to go to 6 points of interest using the coordinates above you to do so, which include a depth gauge. Also, once you get close to the coordinates, you can use this button to ping and find the exact location of the barrel on your radar, which should save you a few minutes. Unlike me, I only discovered that on my 4th playthrough for this video. Also, as you turn, the levers for the sub will also turn and move the same way, which I thought was a cool touch. The first thing you'll notice is... oh, jeez. Stay. Stay. Please stay. Please. That'll do. The first thing you'll notice is the ocean is very empty. There's a few rocks and pieces of seaweed here and there and some fish floating around, but there really isn't a lot, and there's nothing here that would make the ocean feel lived in, which I believe is by design. That's not a criticism. It makes the ocean feel eerie. And even though it's bright out and you can see fairly well, there's still a lot in the distance that you can't see that well. This game's atmosphere is very specific, if that makes any sense. It's not oppressive like Iron Lung's claustrophobic, rust-filled submarine is, where the only colors that you can see are various shades of red and orange and black. No, this game is open, you can see out the submarine where you're going, and the colors are way more vivid and varied. This game's atmosphere is less of an in-your-face oppressiveness and more of a quiet eeriness. You'll even notice that for most of the game, there's no soundtrack. You are forced to take in this lonely environment with zero distractions, like the game is forcing your eyes open, manipulating your concentration. It really is the kind of quiet where in any other day it might be relaxing, but this isn't any other day. Something is very wrong. Just like the age-old saying, it's quiet. Too quiet. But despite this, paradoxically, the game can be pretty relaxing at times. I enjoyed just piloting the submarine around, looking at different parts of the map, listening to the muffled sound of water and bubbles inside of the submarine. This game really straddles the line between creepy and cozy. Now, the design of the submarine seems to be at least partially inspired by the Bathysphere and the expeditions of William Beebe in the 1930s, which really wouldn't surprise me given that his expeditions occurred in the Sargasso Sea. The Bathysphere was a spherical submarine that was much smaller and less high-tech than our craft is. It was made spherical to better withstand the pressures of the deep ocean, and it even had a 3-inch thick window to look out of. At the time, this submarine reached depths that set records, with the deepest being 900 meters in 1934. Beebe would relay his observations through telephone wire up to Gloria Hollister, another explorer, who would record what he saw. What's really interesting about this is that William Beebe found 5 new species of bioluminescent deep-sea fish that we have not been able to find since then. Some look like these 8-foot-long bioluminescent eels or barracuda, and others look like these weird anglerfish-type creatures. And obviously there was no way for him to take samples or specimens back with him through the submarine, so all we are left with are his descriptions. And while these aren't sea monsters or sea serpents, I still find stories like this really interesting. These bioluminescent cryptids are described very beautifully, and whatever Beebe saw down there must have been beautiful. I mean, like, a truly once-in-a-lifetime mystical experience. If you get the chance to read through what some of this guy wrote about his experiences and his adventures going down into the ocean, this guy was a really good writer. Even the mundane stuff that he described that we know is true and real are described in a very poetic way. Beebe described all of the bioluminescent fish and creatures he saw in the Black Sea as stars gone mad. He thought some of Hollister's notes that she took from his descriptions were frustrating because they didn't truly capture the beauty of the light show and color show that he saw down there. But what could? Now, when we get to the first point of interest, we see it's a yellow barrel. Approaching it, when you click the scan button, a laser shoots out to interact with the barrel. This causes it to break free and float to the surface. We have collected our first barrel, full of the organic material that was mentioned in the intro. Going to the next coordinate, we collect another barrel, but this coordinate also has something special. If you look around for a bit, you'll find a VHS tape floating in the middle of the dark expanse, releasing bubbles as if it were breathing. If we touch it with our submarine, we will collect it, and it will begin playing on our monitor. At first, it just shows analog horror-style glitchy footage of an ocean. Then, it shows a lone whale swimming peacefully in the ocean. Juxtaposing this peaceful footage is the eerie text.
When we found it, we lost everything. It is everything.
It then goes on to show a strange organic object that seems to be throbbing, maybe breathing. Whatever is down here is so important that whoever made this tape goes so far as to say it is everything. I'm sure that flashes certain images in the minds of anybody familiar with oceanic and cosmic horror. Visions of these vast, cyclopean ruins of long-dead alien civilizations, and dreaming gods beneath the waves. The idea of the ocean hiding something vast, awful, and incomprehensible is not a new one. The ocean is a vast place, and while we have detailed maps of the ocean floor, we have not explored and set foot in every part of it. We haven't explored and set foot in most of it, actually. We'll see who made this tape soon, along with the horrors that they were discussing. Upon collecting the third barrel, our computer gives us a set of coordinates with a depth of 0, and some of the letters are replaced with numbers in a strange glitch. This is also when the sun sets, and the atmosphere goes from a little bit cozy to not cozy at all as we are plunged into darkness. Once we reach these coordinates, we see this strange phantom in the distance, surrounded by a disturbing red-orange glow, connected to a strange line or tentacle. If we follow this tentacle all the way down, there's nothing, no Easter egg or anything. And if we approach it, it disappears, and we are given the coordinates for the fourth barrel. What's strange about this phantom, besides the glowing red eyes, is that tentacle. It winds through the water like a fishing line, like whatever's on the other end is using this human visage to bait you and lure you in. This is not an uncommon trope in underwater horror stories. Stories often like to pit us as the prey of an anglerfish-like creature, asking what if there was a creature out there that tried to mimic humans in some ways to lure us in. And that trope even extends beyond underwater horror. It doesn't have to be like a big monster at the other end with a literal string and lure, and then the human part is like vestigial, just used to lure you in. I mean, the trope of skinwalkers, flesh gates, the goat man. If you take a naturalist interpretation to those creatures, and of course taking into account that uncanny valley theory of human evolution, where we develop the uncanny valley in order to spot predators that kind of try to look like us, but something's not quite right, then this is an even more common trope. We like to think we're at the top of the food chain and the top of the animal kingdom, but what if there was something that used our psychology to manipulate us and hunt us? It's such a common trope that it's a cliche now, but I think when it's done well, it can be really creepy and impactful. And with this game's quiet atmosphere, I think it pulls off an effective build-up and a raising of tension. As we travel to these coordinates, suddenly, breathing can be heard right behind us. When we turn around, we get a brief, microsecond glimpse of the creature at the end of the tentacle, including the tentacle, before it vanishes completely. I like the quiet jump scares like this. I am not a jump scare hater. I think the jump scares have their place in horror, but just let the monster speak for itself. And don't give me some musical sting or some scream that the creature obviously didn't actually make and is just there to startle you and force a reaction. We can get a closer look at this entity, and though it is veiled through the low poly graphical style, I think it's supposed to represent a rotting corpse of some kind. Gives a whole new meaning to Corpse Ocean, doesn't it?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Anyways, because our protagonist is stupid, we don't immediately call it a night and surface, so we continue on to the fourth barrel. Once we get to the coordinates, we find the wreckage of the naval submarine that went missing. There's a giant breach in the hull, covered in a green organic substance, perhaps the very one inside of the barrels we're collecting. And what's most interesting is sprouting from the breach are a bunch of tentacle vine things that look very similar to the ones attached to the corpse trying to lure us in. Now, our fourth and fifth barrels are both at this submarine, and upon collecting the fifth, we are given coordinates that take us to a depth of 170, when our maximum allowed depth is 100. Yeah, I no longer have sympathy for our protagonist, to be honest. If my computer is telling me to go deeper than my submarine is rated to withstand, I'm radioing the ship and telling them there's a malfunction and that I am surfacing.
No, sir, there's no malfunction. You have to go down there. You have to do your job. Yeah, roger that, Captain. Unfortunately, I wasn't asking.
That's a rational reaction right there. Not to stay silent like you're the Doom guy going in here to fight all of these cosmic horrors. You are not him. But apparently our protagonist thinks he is him, so we keep going. As we get closer, another event occurs. In the distance, a yellow dot gets closer and closer, faster and faster, and you see that this is an old diver suit coming right at you with what looks like a skull or a rotted face in its helmet, and some of those dark green vine tentacles growing out of it. The phantom diver collides with your submarine and then starts banging on the outside, wordlessly demanding to be let inside. You know what, I stand corrected. Maybe it's a good idea to go deeper, actually. I feel like an instant death from the pressure turning me into a fine red mist will be a lot better than whatever this thing has in store for me. Now, phantom divers are another iconic trope in internet ocean horror. These are essentially ghost divers that have been spotted by actual divers out in the ocean. There's a lot of stories out there that mention these somehow, including the r/no-sleep story, Confessions of a Deep Sea Diver. Ugh, I know, no sleep, just bear with me, we'll get through this, don't worry, we'll get through this together. Speaking of internet horror, I'm a writer, and I have a Substack page. Right now on that Substack, there's 2 essays and 1 horror story, and I plan to bump those numbers up here real soon. Right now, every article and the 1 story on there is free, and they will always be free. I do intend to have a paid tier at some point, which will have extra stories. However, every story that I directly advertise on this YouTube channel will always remain free, including the one that I'm currently working on that is inspired by Iron Lung and this game. So please check out the Substack, consider subscribing, it just takes your email and I promise not to spam you. Or if you prefer, you can check out the stories that are free on the Substack on the Tales from the Creep subreddit. Both links will be in the description. Alright, now back to the video, where the main character finds a diver that, upon closer inspection of the helmet, is a rotting corpse on the inside, but it's still moving and like trying to act like it's part of the team. And his rebreather didn't give off any bubbles, showing that he was not breathing. And then there's the Divin' On Creepypasta series from 4chan's /Xboard, where the protagonist says that these ghost or phantom divers, which he calls black divers, are a persistent legend that have been around in the diving community since diving began. This story describes the black divers as ghostly divers that, much like the previous story, don't give off any bubbles from their rebreathers. The story says that sometimes there's a corpse or a face inside of the suit, and sometimes it's just pitch black in there. Another interpretation from that story, which I think is really interesting, creepy, and also plausible, actually, is that these black divers are an unknown species of cephalopod that have found discarded divers' suits and have gotten inside in order to mimic humans that they've observed. Cephalopods are very intelligent creatures, and they have been known to mimic and camouflage. So I think this was a really interesting idea for a story, and also, for anybody who cares, I'm going to be making a dedicated video on the Divin' On Creepypasta at some point. Here's the thing about phantom and ghost divers, though. While, like listed before, there are many examples of them in internet horror, I actually can't find many real-world examples or accounts of ghost divers. They're not as well documented outside of internet horror like something like sea serpents or ghost ships are. I only found 2 articles talking about real-world ghost diver sightings, and even then, they didn't give any primary sources, so take those with a grain of salt, but they will be linked in the description along with my other sources if you want to check them out. But yeah, I have no idea where they got that information from. That's really interesting to me. I mean, on its face, ghost divers seem like a fairly simple concept, and I would have expected a lot more mentions in nautical folklore about them. I mean, much like ghost ships like the Flying Dutchman, but outside of these /X threads and no-sleep stories, I can barely find anything. So now, it appears, we have 2 corpses stalking our submarine. Gives a whole new... But whatever this thing, this force out there that's everything, is, if we are to assume that these tentacles belong to it or are controlled by it somehow, it has the ability to raise the dead, or at least puppet the dead bodies to do its bidding. And if the imagery of that tentacle is meant to be interpreted like a fishing line or like an anglerfish bait, then it's using these dead corpses to lure us closer to it. But why? Well, we may soon find out. It has the ability to modify our computer, giving us these coordinates unrelated to our mission. I mean, that's how we found the one corpse with glowing red eyes. And now suddenly we get coordinates that are telling us to go deeper than our submarine was designed for. I have a feeling those weren't pre-programmed in. As we follow the coordinates, we get the proper north, south, east, west points, and then go down, 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 until... This is such a cool reveal. The entire soundtrack has been silent, save for ambient noises and noises of the ghost divers outside. And now we get this brutal, swelling crescendo of a piece that I think really captures the gravity, the weight, and the atmosphere of the situation. This song, I'm sorry, I'm gonna glaze the composer for a second, Listening to this song is what reading Lovecraft feels like. This is what a Lovecraftian soundtrack should always sound like. It's big, it's serious, it is incomprehensibly beyond us and grim, and there is nothing you can do about it. And the crushing weight of that realization slowly dawning on you, slowly crushing you, is captured beautifully in this track. I'm gonna link the Corpse Ocean soundtrack in the description. Seriously, props to the composer. Speaking of Lovecraft, it appears what we found is an underwater temple. There are strange carvings on the side. It looks almost Greco-Roman in style with its columns, strange twisting vine-like structures. And there's an eerie green glow coming from inside. Now I wonder if Lovecraft wrote anything like this. Ah, hello there, and welcome to my library of true horror literature. Today, we are going to be discussing The Temple by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to go explaining the entire story to you, even though it's a pretty short one. We'd be here all day. I'm just going to be explaining the parts that are relevant for this video and for this game. However, if you want my more in-depth thoughts on H.P. Lovecraft and his writing and some of my favorite stories of his, then feel free to check out the video right here where I go in-depth on my 3 favorite H.P. Lovecraft stories. The Temple is another one of my favorite H.P. Lovecraft stories. It's one of the stories that I read early on in my true reading of H.P. Lovecraft, and it was around the time when I was basically only consuming ocean horror stories. Alright. Let's begin. The story follows a German U-boat and its crew. After they defeat an enemy ship, they loot an ivory idol of a very handsome young fellow with an ivory wreath off of one of the bodies. And legend has it that that handsome young fellow that was depicted in the ivory was me. The submarine crew soon begins to go crazy as engine failure causes them to drift aimlessly beneath the ocean, and eventually only 2 characters are left. Although it's never explicitly confirmed, they eventually drift to the ruins of a city that our narrator claims is the lost city of Atlantis. Once there, the only other crewmate starts going crazy, hearing voices, something calling to him to go outside of the submarine. Our protagonist, being a very sweet man, grants his last request and shoots him out the submarine, basically, along with the ivory idol. Then, our narrator starts hearing the call, and one of the many temples in the city begins glowing. There's a light emanating from inside the temple, and a laughter echoing in our protagonist's mind. Eventually, our protagonist begins writing this very account that we are reading, before donning a diving suit, and presumably walking right into that temple. Now, there's a few differences between the temple in this story and the one that we see in-game, mainly the location. It's still set in the Atlantic Ocean, but the story puts it at around 25 degrees north and 35 degrees west, which is closer to the coast of Africa and the Sahara Desert than it is the Sargasso Sea. Still, I would be really surprised if this story did not serve as at least a little bit of inspiration for this story. I mean, besides the obvious similarity of there being a temple underneath the ocean, there's also the vaguely Greco-Roman style and an eerie glow emanating from within. Now, using what we know from the story, which isn't a whole lot, it's pretty vague, like a lot of Lovecraft stuff, and what we know from the game, which isn't a whole lot, it's also pretty vague, I think it's safe to assume that if we assume Kira used this story as inspiration, that something inside of that temple is calling to us, and it does not have good intentions. Alright, thank you for stopping by my library. Back to the video. As we enter the disturbing sunken fane, we see more of these columns dotting the halls, and you will find that it is very hard to navigate, and you will be bouncing around these walls like a pinball. There's also more of the strange carvings inside the walls. This architecture is foreign, clearly not built or fit for human habitation or use. As you go, you find there is a declivity in the architecture, and you go deeper and deeper and deeper down a sharp drop until you get to this room, and you are at the depth of 170. Whatever was calling you wanted you right here. The music goes silent, and then the lights go out. And then, in 1997, NOAA received strange reports around the Sargasso Sea, near the same coordinates as the Navy's lost sub. This satellite image is all that remains of those reports. Let's take a closer look at that satellite image. In the top right, it says this is an unidentified suspected sea mammal. Looking in the bottom left, there's a scale showing 10 meters. If we use that to find out how long this thing is, it is about 50 meters long, or 164 feet. That is about twice the length of a blue whale. I think the implication here is that 8 years after our expedition, this thing has woken up. The year here is also important. 1997 is the year when Noah recorded the bloop. Now, you all probably know what the bloop is if you're on this side of the internet, but I'm gonna explain it anyway, just for completion's sake. I mean, what kind of video essay slop channel would I be if I didn't? In 1997, Noah recorded a strange noise in the Pacific Ocean where they had set up multiple underwater microphones spaced thousands of kilometers apart. The thing is, this noise was recorded on each one, meaning that it was powerful enough to be heard for miles. Now, this has been chalked up to sea quakes and underwater volcanoes and even glaciers, but the cooler explanation is that it is a noise made by some unknown monstrous beast. And this still gets some conspiracy theorists and cryptozoologists going to this day. And the noise is called the bloop because it sounds like that when the noise is sped up. It's kind of like a bloop. Bloop. Now, I think Kira may have also taken inspiration from another mysterious noise that Noah recorded, called Julia. This one was recorded in 1999, and honestly, they're pretty similar. I mean, just like a powerful noise that was picked up on a lot of microphones. However, this one went viral a while back because a short story was attached to it. This story says that at the time that the noise was made and recorded, an Apollo mission actually captured an image of the area of the ocean where it was recorded, and it is said that there was a large shadow there that is many times larger than the Empire State Building. While there's obviously logical explanations for both of these, and that Apollo story is actually just fiction, the important thing here is that, like many other things about the ocean, it has captured the minds of storytellers and fiction writers since, in order to imagine the terrible things that could be lurking beneath the waves, just out of sight. And that's the end of Corpse Ocean. Or is it? See, at the end of the game, in the thanks for playing screen, if you look in the top right corner, you can see 4 sets of hidden coordinates that contain secrets. What could these possibly be? Well, if we play a new game, we can just go to these coordinates and see. So let's go down the list of coordinates and go to each one and see what we can find. Going to each coordinate, we see that they are VHS tapes. The first one appears to show, at first, a slideshow of random 80s styles commercials, probably implying this tape was hastily taped over. Then, it shows the inside of a submarine, and I'd bet money that it's the same Navy submarine that had all the organic material from the perspective of an officer 3rd class. We can hear heavy breathing, as the officer apparently recording, who we will see as a recurring character, is telling his family that he won't make it home. We can also see a faint red glow, similar to the first phantom that we saw in the ocean, and inside of our submarine. Already haunting! Let's continue. The second tape we find seems to have been recorded earlier, as the officer debates with another crew member whether or not to dive to explore something. The officer mentions that pressure and cold shouldn't be a problem because we have those old metal diving suits in storage. Sound familiar? I think that they're talking about the temple here. I mean, what else could they be exploring that's relevant? The metal diving suit is obviously talking about the yellow phantom diver that attacked our submarine. This seems to be his origin story. On the third tape, it seems that the diver has gone missing, and that he's been gone so long he's going to run out of oxygen. The officer says that they need to surface to get help, if only to retrieve the body. Finally, on the fourth and last secret tape, it's revealed that the diver came back without any help. This should be impossible. He should have run out of oxygen yesterday. The officer says he doesn't like how the diver is acting, and these are all the secret tapes. But I think it's enough to piece together what happened. Now that we have all of this information, let's put together a chronological timeline of everything that happened in this game. Sometime probably around July of 1989, this Navy submarine in the Sargasso Sea stumbles across this ancient temple. They send a diver in one of their old metal suits to investigate it, and he goes missing, presumably running out of oxygen. Then, a day after he should be dead, he returns. On August 3rd, 1989 is when the first tape happens, where the diver that came back finally takes over the submarine, causing it to burst open with the organic material, which presumably they collected from the temple when they discovered it. This material then takes over the bodies of the crew, using them to lure in other victims. I think this is evidenced, besides just drawing inferences from what happens in the game, by the "It is everything" tape. When it says the crew gave up everything or lost everything, I think they're implying their lives, obviously, but not just that they died, that their bodies and maybe their souls are being used by this eldritch deity to lure in even more victims, that they gave up everything in order to serve this thing. On August 29th, 1989, the submarine was found, and in September of 1989, our expedition happens, and we too are lured in by this monstrosity. Finally, in 1997, this thing presumably leaves the temple, and this causes the bloop sound that is heard many thousands of kilometers away. Who knows what this monster has in store for humanity now that it has been released. This game is a love letter to oceanic horror. Much like the authors of the 19th and 20th century, Kira was inspired by the mystery and danger of the Sargasso Sea, and made their own take on the horror of that region. But not just that region, on the horror of the sea as a whole. And while the ocean is haunting for good reason, it's dangerous and mysterious, it's also really beautiful. And that's captured in this game. There's a random event where every now and then you can stumble upon a whale just swimming peacefully in the ocean. These majestic creatures having no idea what's going on, just enjoying their life. Personally, as scary as it sounds, I would have loved to have been in Beebe's place when he was in that submarine. I think I could put aside my fear of sea monsters and the pressure to see that piece of colorful beauty hidden away by Mother Nature in a place that no man would dare reach on his own, that no man could reach on his own. Think about that. What other beautiful things are out there? Maybe deep in these caves and caverns, or in a forested mountain area that can't be reached on foot. Sure, maybe scary monsters, but also, as Beebe would put in his book, an inexhaustible source of spiritual and aesthetic delight. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video.